I never thought watching my father trip over his own feet would lead me to discover a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for months. But that's exactly what happened. And by the time we understood what those falls really meant, our entire family had already changed forever. My father, Richard, was the kind of man who built things with his hands and fixed problems with patience. At 63, he still worked part-time at the hardware store in our small town in Oregon, not because he needed the money, but because he loved talking to people about wood stains and power tools. He'd raised me and my sister Emma on stories about hard work and perseverance, always saying that a man's character shows in how he handles the small things. Our family lived in one of those neighborhoods where everyone knew each other's names. My mother, Carol, had been a school librarian for 30 years before retiring, and their house still smelled like old books and her famous cinnamon rolls. Emma lived 2 streets over with her husband and their twin boys, who were 7 and already showing signs of inheriting our father's stubborn streak. I was the practical one in the family. At 35, I worked as a physical therapist at the local clinic, which meant I spent my days watching people move, analyzing gaits, spotting weaknesses in balance and coordination. It was my job to notice things others might miss, and yet somehow I missed the most important signs happening right in front of me and my own father. Looking back now, I realize we all missed them. Or maybe we just didn't want to see. The falls started in March. The first one happened during Sunday dinner at their house. Dad was carrying a casserole dish from the kitchen when his foot caught on the edge of the carpet runner. The dish crashed to the floor, and he went down with it, catching himself hard on one knee. "Damn rug," he muttered, embarrassed, as Mom and I rushed to help him up. "I'd been meaning to fix that corner, but the rug wasn't curled up." I checked. 2 weeks later, Emma called me from their house. "Dad just fell in the backyard. He says he's fine, but Sarah, he fell over nothing. Just walking across the grass. Was he dizzy?" I asked, my professional instincts kicking in. He says no. He says he just lost his balance. At 63, balance issues weren't uncommon. But Dad had always been steady, coordinated. He still played weekend basketball with guys from church. Then it was 3 falls, 4. By the end of April, it was happening almost weekly. Each time, Dad had an excuse. The ground was uneven. He wasn't paying attention. He turned too fast. His shoes were worn out. Mom started calling me after each incident, her voice tight with worry she was trying to hide. "He won't go to the doctor, Sarah. You know how he is. He says it's just him being clumsy in his old age." But my father had never been clumsy, and 63 wasn't that old. I started noticing other things during my visits. He seemed tired more than usual. He'd always been an early riser, but now I'd find him dozing in his recliner at 3 in the afternoon. His skin looked pale, almost grayish. When I hugged him, he felt thinner, less solid. "Dad, when's the last time you had a physical?" I asked one evening while helping him fix a drawer in the kitchen. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just getting older. Happens to everyone. Falling every week isn't normal aging, Sarah." He gave me that look, the one that meant the conversation was over. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not going to waste doctor's time with a little clumsiness." That's when I knew something was really wrong. My father was avoiding something, and in my experience, people only avoid doctors when they're afraid of what they might find. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early May. I was between patients when my phone lit up with Mum's number. Her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Sarah, we're at the hospital. Your father fell down the basement stairs. He's conscious, but they're running tests. You need to come now. I broke every speed limit getting there." When I burst through the emergency room doors, I found Emma already in the waiting area, her face red and swollen from crying. "He fell hard," she said, grabbing my hands. "Mom said he just collapsed at the top of the stairs and tumbled all the way down. Sarah, he could have died. Mom was in the examination room with him." When they finally let us in, I barely recognized the man in the hospital bed. Dad had always seemed invincible to me, but lying there with a bandage on his head and bruises already forming on his arms, he looked fragile, old, scared. "I'm okay," he said, but his voice was weak. "Just took a tumble." "Mr. Harrison," the ER doctor said, stepping into the room with a tablet in his hands. "We've run some preliminary tests, and there are a few concerning findings. Your blood work shows severely low vitamin B12 levels and significant anemia. These could definitely explain your balance issues and frequent falls." I felt a wave of relief. Vitamin deficiency. That was fixable, treatable, simple. But the doctor's face didn't match the simplicity of his words. He looked uncomfortable, like he was choosing his next words very carefully. "However, given the severity of the anemia and some of your other symptoms that your wife mentioned, fatigue, weight loss, loss of appetite, we need to investigate further. Sometimes these vitamin deficiencies can be secondary to other conditions. We'd like to admit you for observation and run some additional tests." "What kind of conditions?" Dad asked, and I heard the fear creeping into his voice. The doctor hesitated. "We want to rule out any gastrointestinal issues that might be preventing proper nutrient absorption, including masses or lesions." The room went silent. Emma reached for my hand. Mom's face had gone completely white. "You think it's cancer," Dad said. "Not a question. A statement. We don't know anything yet," the doctor replied gently. "But given your age and symptoms, we need to be thorough. The vitamin B12 deficiency and anemia could be caused by many things. Pernicious anemia, for instance, or ulcers. We just need to look." They admitted him that afternoon. Over the next 3 days, my father underwent an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, CT scans, more blood work. We took turns staying with him, none of us wanting him to be alone when the results came back. Emma brought her boys to visit, and watching Dad pretend to be strong for his grandsons, while we all pretended not to be terrified, was one of the hardest things I'd ever witnessed. I did what I do when I'm scared. I researched. Late at night in the hospital cafeteria, I read everything I could find about vitamin B12 deficiency, pernicious anemia, gastrointestinal cancers. The more I read, the more the pieces started falling into place. The fatigue, the paleness, the weight loss, the falls, caused by the neurological effects of severe B12 deficiency, something I should have recognized given my medical background. I had watched my father stumble and fall for 2 months, and I had dismissed it as aging. I had missed it, and the guilt was crushing. On the 3rd day, Dr. Patel, the gastroenterologist, came into the room where we'd all gathered. Mom was sitting beside Dad's bed holding his hand. Emma and I stood on the other side. The doctor's face told us everything before he even opened his mouth. "We found a mass in your stomach," he said quietly. "The biopsy confirms it's malignant. Gastric adenocarcinoma. Stage 3. The words seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Mom made a sound I'd never heard her make before, something between a gasp and a sob. Emma started crying immediately. I felt my legs go weak, and I had to grip the bed rail to stay standing. Dad just nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting it. "How bad is stage 3? He asked. Dr. Patel sat down, which somehow made it worse. Doctors don't sit down for good news. It means the cancer has spread to nearby lymph nodes, but we don't see evidence of distant metastasis yet. That's important. It means we can fight this. You'll need chemotherapy and likely surgery. It's going to be difficult, but people do beat this." "What are the odds?" Dad asked. Always practical, always wanting the facts. 5-year survival rates for stage 3 gastric cancer are around 20 to 30% with aggressive treatment. 20 to 30%. I felt like I was going to be sick. My father, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me through calculus and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, had a 70 to 80% chance of dying within 5 years. "Why didn't we catch this earlier?" Mom whispered. "He was falling for months. Why didn't anyone tell us to look for this?" The doctor's expression was compassionate but honest. Gastric cancer is notoriously difficult to detect early. The symptoms, fatigue, weight changes, digestive issues, are often subtle and attributed to other things. The vitamin B12 deficiency happens because the tumor affects the stomach's ability to produce intrinsic factor, which is necessary for B12 absorption. That deficiency led to anemia, and neurological symptoms, which caused the balance problems and falls. In a way, the falls were your father's body trying to tell us something was very wrong. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back in time and drag my father to the doctor after the first fall. After the second, I wanted to undo every moment I dismissed his symptoms as normal aging. The days after the diagnosis blurred together into a haze of appointments, treatment plans, and impossible conversations. Dad started chemotherapy within 2 weeks. We all tried to be strong for him, but the truth was, we were falling apart in our own ways. Emma threw herself into research, filling 3-ring binders with articles about gastric cancer treatments, alternative therapies, diet plans. She called me every night with new information, new hope, new statistics. I think she believed that if she just learned enough, she could control the outcome. I understood. I was doing the same thing, just more quietly. Mom became Dad's fierce protector. She organized his medications, drove him to every appointment, sat with him through every chemotherapy session. I watched her age 10 years in 2 weeks. The woman who had always been so put together, who ironed dish towels and color-coordinated her closet, started showing up places with mismatched shoes and her hair undone. But she never left Dad's side, and me? I was drowning in guilt. One night, about 3 weeks into treatment, I was at my parents' house helping Mom cook dinner. Dad was sleeping upstairs, exhausted from that day's chemo. Emma hadn't arrived yet. It was just the two of us in the kitchen, moving around each other in the familiar dance of women who'd shared that space for decades. I should have known, I said suddenly, my voice cracking. Mom, I'm a physical therapist. I assess people's movement and balance for a living. I watched him fall over and over, and I didn't push hard enough for him to see a doctor. I didn't. I should have known. Mom stopped chopping vegetables and looked at me with tears in her eyes. Sarah, honey, this is not your fault, but if I'd been more insistent, if I'd recognized the pattern sooner, then what? We would have found it a few weeks earlier. The doctor said this had probably been growing for a year or more. Your father is stubborn, you know that. He wouldn't have gone to the doctor unless something forced his hand. The fall down the stairs forced his hand. Maybe that fall saved his life. I started crying then, really crying, for the first time since the diagnosis. Mom held me while I sobbed into her shoulder, and I realized that she needed this too. She'd been so busy being strong for Dad that she hadn't let herself break down. I'm so scared, I whispered. I'm not ready to lose him. Neither am I, she said. But we're not losing him yet. We're fighting, all of us. Dad's treatment was brutal. The chemotherapy made him sick in ways I hadn't imagined. The man who'd been embarrassed about falling was now too weak to walk to the bathroom without help. His hair fell out, which he joked about, saying he'd been going bald anyway. But his spirit, that core of strength that had always defined him, stayed intact. One afternoon in June, I was sitting with him while he rested after a treatment. He'd been quiet for a long time, just watching the birds at the feeder outside his window. I've been thinking about those falls, he said suddenly. Dad, you don't need to. No, let me say this. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. I knew something was wrong, I did. I felt off for months before the falling started. I was tired all the time. Food didn't taste right. I was losing weight, and I told myself it was good, that I needed to lose a few pounds anyway. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Why didn't you say something? He was quiet for a moment. Pride, partly. Fear, mostly. I was scared that if I went to the doctor, they'd find something. And if they found something, it would be real. As long as I didn't know, I could pretend everything was fine. Stupid, right? Not stupid, human. The falls, though. He shook his head. I couldn't ignore those. Everyone saw them. Your mother started getting so worried. And that fall down the stairs, Sarah, for a second while I was falling, I thought, this is it. This is how I die. But then I woke up in the hospital, and I was alive. And I knew I'd been given another chance. A chance to fight this, I said. A chance to stop hiding, he corrected. I spent months pretending nothing was wrong, and it nearly killed me. Now I'm fighting for my life, and you know what? I wish I'd been this honest. this present, this grateful all along. It shouldn't take cancer to wake you up to your own life. His words haunted me for days. How many of us go through life hiding from truths we're afraid to face? How many warning signs do we ignore because acknowledging them means everything changes? The surgery was scheduled for August. Dr. Patel explained that they would remove part of Dad's stomach and the affected lymph nodes. Then he'd continue chemotherapy to target any remaining cancer cells. The surgery would be risky. There would be complications to manage. His quality of life would change permanently. But it was his best shot at survival. The night before the surgery, our whole family gathered at the hospital. Emma's boys drew pictures for Grandpa that the nurses taped all over his room. Emma's husband, Tom, who was usually quiet, told stories that made Dad laugh until he cried. Mom sat close to Dad, their hands intertwined, and I saw the way they looked at each other. 37 years of love and partnership concentrated into single glances. "I want to say something," Dad announced when visiting hours were almost over. We all went quiet. "I need you all to listen. Tomorrow is going to be hard. The recovery is going to be harder. There's a real possibility that I might not make it through this, and we all know that, so let's not pretend." "Dad," Emma started, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. If something happens tomorrow, I need you all to know that I don't have regrets. Not anymore. I'm grateful for every moment I've had with each of you. I'm grateful for my life, even the hard parts. Maybe especially the hard parts, because they taught me what matters. And what matters is this. Right here, the people in this room." Mom was crying silently. Emma was crying not so silently. The twins looked confused but solemn, sensing the gravity of the moment. I tried to hold it together, but tears were streaming down my face. "I'm also grateful for those falls," Dad continued, and a small smile played at his lips. "Because as much as they scared everyone and hurt my pride, they forced me to face what I'd been running from. They made this fight possible. Sometimes the things that bring us down are actually trying to save us." The surgery lasted 9 hours. We camped out in the waiting room, a small tribe of exhausted, terrified people holding on to each other and hope in equal measure. Emma paced. Tom got coffee every 30 minutes, whether anyone wanted it or not. Mum sat in the same chair the entire time, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. I tried to read, but the words on the page meant nothing. When Dr. Patel finally emerged in his surgical scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck, we all stood up as one. "He made it through," he said, and Mom actually collapsed back into her chair with relief. The surgery went well. We removed the tumor and 12 lymph nodes. 8 of them showed cancer, which we expected based on the imaging. But we got clean margins, which means we removed all the visible cancer. "That's what we wanted. What happens now?" I asked. "Recovery, then more chemotherapy. We'll monitor him closely. He's got a long road ahead, but he's through the worst of today. You can see him in about an hour when he's out of recovery." When they finally let us into his ICU room, Dad looked so small and fragile, surrounded by all those machines and tubes. But he was breathing. He was alive. And when he opened his eyes and saw all of us standing there, he smiled weakly. "Still here," he whispered. "Still here," Mom echoed, kissing his forehead. The recovery was everything Dr. Patel had warned us it would be. There were setbacks and complications, infections, pain management issues. Days when Dad was so discouraged he didn't want to keep fighting. Days when we didn't know if he would keep fighting. But there were also small victories. The first time, he walked the hospital hallway without assistance. The first meal he kept down. The day his scans came back showing no new cancer growth. Each of these moments became celebrations, markers of survival that we clung to. 3 months after the surgery, Dad's oncologist used a word we'd been afraid to hope for: remission. The cancer wasn't gone, not completely. He'd be on maintenance chemotherapy for a long time, maybe forever. His stomach would never work the same way. He'd have dietary restrictions and ongoing monitoring. But the tumor was gone, and there was no evidence of active disease. It wasn't a miracle. It was medicine and luck, and my father's stubborn determination to survive. But it felt like a miracle. It's been 18 months since Dad's diagnosis, and I'm sitting at their kitchen table watching him make breakfast. He moves slower now, more carefully. He's thinner and he tires easily. But he's here, he's alive, and he's different in ways that matter more than the physical changes. He listens more. He says, "I love you" more easily. He doesn't hide his feelings or pretend to be stronger than he is. He goes to every doctor's appointment without complaint. He takes his supplements religiously, his B12 shots without missing a single one. He treats his body like the precious, fragile thing it is. Last week, Emma's oldest son, Jamie, came running into their house and tripped over his own feet, going down hard on his knees. He started crying, and Dad scooped him up, examined the scraped knees, and said, "You know, buddy, sometimes falling down is your body's way of telling you to slow down and pay attention. The important thing is what you do after you fall. You get back up, you learn from it, and you keep going." Jamie nodded, already forgetting his tears. But I caught Dad's eye over Jamie's head, and we shared a moment of understanding. We were both thinking about all those other falls, the ones that had meant so much more. I've learned things through this ordeal that I couldn't have learned any other way. I learned that guilt is a heavy burden that doesn't change the past. I learned that the body speaks in whispers before it screams, and we have to listen to those whispers. I learned that love means showing up, even when you're scared, even when you don't know what to say or do. But most importantly, I learned that the things we try to hide from, the fears we refuse to face, the truths we don't want to acknowledge, those are often the very things that most need our attention. My father spent months ignoring symptoms because he was afraid of what they might mean. And I spent months dismissing obvious warning signs because I didn't want to believe something could be seriously wrong. We were both in denial, just in different ways. And that denial nearly cost him his life. Now I approach my own health differently. Every symptom gets attention. Every change gets investigated. I don't assume things will just get better on their own. And in my practice, when patients tell me about falls or balance issues, I dig deeper. I ask more questions. I don't accept easy answers anymore. Emma has softened in unexpected ways. She used to be so focused on achievement and productivity, always rushing to the next thing. Now she shows up at Mom and Dad's house for no reason, just to sit and talk. She brings the boys over and lets them spend lazy afternoons with their grandfather, not worrying about schedules or activities. She's learned that presence is more important than perfection. Mom has found a strength I didn't know she possessed. She's become an advocate for early cancer screening, volunteering with a local health organization to share their story. She tells people, listen to your body. Listen to your loved ones. Don't wait for a fall to force you to pay attention. The other day, I asked Dad if he ever wishes things had been different. If he wishes we'd caught the cancer earlier, before it got to stage 3. He thought about it for a long time before answering. Would I like to have been spared the treatment and the pain? Sure, but would I want to have missed everything this experience taught me? No, I spent 63 years living pretty unconsciously, taking things for granted. The cancer woke me up. The falls woke me up. I'm more alive now than I was before, even though I'm technically dying. We're all dying, Sarah. I just know it more clearly than most people. And that clarity is a gift. I don't know how many more years we'll have with him. The statistics still aren't great. Stage 3. Gastric cancer survivors live with uncertainty every day. But Dad has taught us that the point isn't how many years you have. It's what you do with them. It's whether you show up fully for your own life. He doesn't fall anymore. The vitamin B12 treatments corrected the deficiency, and his balance is as good as it can be given everything his body has been through. But we all remember those falls. They've become part of our family story, a reminder that sometimes the things that bring us down are actually trying to wake us up. I started this story by saying I never thought watching my father trip over his own feet would lead me to discover a truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The truth wasn't just the cancer. It was something deeper than that. It was the truth about how we live, how we avoid, how we pretend everything is fine until we can't pretend anymore. My father's falls weren't just a symptom of vitamin deficiency. They were a wake-up call for our entire family. They forced us to pay attention, to face our fears, to stop hiding from difficult truths. And in the end, they may have saved his life. So I'll ask you, have you ever ignored warning signs because you were afraid of what they might mean? Have you ever watched someone you love struggle and told yourself it was probably nothing? Have you ever waited too long to face a truth that needed facing? We all fall sometimes. The question is whether we'll pay attention to what those falls are trying to tell us. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own life or your own family differently, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Real experiences, real lessons, real people navigating the hardest parts of being human. And please, if you or someone you love is experiencing unexplained falls, chronic fatigue, or persistent symptoms that don't make sense, don't wait. Don't dismiss it as aging or clumsiness. Listen to what your body is trying to tell you. Because sometimes a fall is just a fall, but sometimes it's a life or death message that we need to hear. Thank you for listening to our story. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and pay attention to the falls.